Shalom! Today we're continuing a video series on the mystery of no man knows the day or the hour. Last week we were talking about how this day of the Lord is going to approach you. Well, now we're going to talk a little bit about how there is actually not just one day. And remember I told you, I showed you the scriptures in Psalm 90 verse 4 and 2 Peter 3 verse 8, how it says that a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is as a day to the Lord. So we're going to talk about God's 7,000-year plan. Okay, the Jews for thousands of years have been teaching about a 7,000-year plan that God has for His whole creation. Now, you could say the first 6,000 years is the time of man. Then we go from 6,001 to 7,000. This is called a 1,000-year Shabbat. And it's also called the Day of Yehovah or the Day of the Lord. Okay, remember, a day is as 1,000 years. The day is also called the Messianic Kingdom and the Millennium. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Millennium. This is why we celebrate the Sabbath every week on the seventh day from Friday evening to Saturday evening. It is to rehearse the Day of the Lord. Yes, we are rehearsing this 1,000-year day by celebrating the Shabbat from Friday evening to Saturday evening. It says in Genesis, God rested on the seventh day. If you read Genesis 1 and 2, you would see God does not appoint an evening or morning to the seventh day. He just sanctified it and He set it apart for us to have this timeless, and I say timeless, 24-hour period with Him. Genesis 2, 1 to 3 says, "Thus the heavens and the earth were completed and all their hosts. And on the seventh day God completed His work which He had done, and He rested on the seventh day from all His work which He had done. Then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it He rested from all His work which God had created and made." It also helps to know the lunar calendar God gave to His people Israel, for the sake of counting the years. Okay, I'm going to now tell you something that many of you may have never heard before. There are two calendars. Now, I realize that there's some out there that want to say we just have one calendar because it's only the spiritual calendar that matters, not the physical calendar. No, both calendars matter. Did you know that you were physically born into the earth? And then, when you met the Lord, you were born again. That's two births. We all have two births. Well, so does the calendar. Okay, so, for the sake of counting the years, we count from Tishri 1, which is approximately mid-September to early October. Sometimes earlier, sometimes later. This is Rosh Hashanah, the New Year. Rosh Hashanah means head of the year. But it's really, the name of this appointed time, this festival, is called Yom Teruah, which means Day of the Awakening Blast. For the sake of counting the years from creation, this is when we count. The year also, there's another new year that begins on Aviv, or the Jews also call it Nisan. Aviv, A-V-I-V, Nisan, N-I-S-A-N. And this is approximately anywhere between the end of March to about late April. God added this calendar for Israel in Exodus 12 for spiritual counting of the months and the observances of appointed times. While we wait on Tishri 1 for the beginning of the Day of Yehovah, we acknowledge it is actually the seventh month to us in the spiritual sense. Don't be tricked, don't be fooled. Don't be confused, okay? The beginning of the year that God told Israel in Exodus 12 is the month of Aviv. Again, between March and April. Okay? However, from the creation of the earth, okay, it starts right around September to October. Okay, so that's its physical celebration. So that's what we're talking about right now. When we're talking about the coming of the day of the Lord, it's going to start on a Tishri 1. Okay, Tishri 1. Or the 7th month, first day. Now, isn't that interesting too? Because 7 is a number of completion. It's a number of rest. And there's a big rest coming that's going to start on the spiritual calendar, the 7th month, but it's actually the 1st month. And if you're confused by that, well, you can always send me an email and I'll help you to better understand it. But I'm going to try and help you to better understand it right now. Okay, so you might read in the scriptures many terms, like if you read it in both the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, you'll see words like in that day, of that day, on that day. It is all talking about the same day. While many prophets in the Bible show how horrible it is, there are many scriptures about how good it is. The way God spoke regarding when a day begins shows that it is in the evening. The day begins in the darkness. Now, before I go on, I just want to share something else with you. That actually, you've all heard about the last days. Okay? A lot of people go about and they say, oh, we're in the last days. We're in the last days. But they don't think about why it's even called the last days. I want you to imagine a week split up into two parts. The first half and the second half. Well, the first half is called the first days of the week. And the last half is called the last days of the week. Okay, so the last days actually began almost 500 years before Yeshua, Jesus, came. So it's been in the last days since then. However, there is something happening right now. We are getting close to the last day. Okay, so I told you that it starts remember it's compared to a day beginning in the evening, and then the day part is the last part of the day. Okay, so it starts off as a day of darkness and gloom. So we are talking about the beginning of the evening of what's called the Yom Shekalosh Shabbat. The day that is called Yom Shekalosh Shabbat, the day that is all of it called Shabbat, a 1,000-year Shabbat. But it starts off with darkness, like every day starts off with an evening. Okay, so looking at Job 15:23, he wanders about for bread, saying, where is it? He knows that a day of darkness is ready at his hand. Psalm 30, verse 5. For his anger is but a moment, his favor is for life. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. See, the evening is always going to represent trouble. The day of the Lord is going to start off with great trouble and destruction and fire, as we've already talked about. That's represented every day when we start off the day in darkness. Joel 2, 1 and 2. Blow the shofar in Zion and sound an alarm on my holy mountain. See, we got a shofar right here. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yehovah, the day of the Lord is coming, for it is at hand, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like the morning clouds spread over the mountains, a people come great and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be any such after them, even for many successive generations. Then in Amos 5, 18 to 20. Woe to you who desire the day of the Lord! For what good is the day of the Lord to you? It will be darkness and not light. It will be as though a man fled from a lion, and a bear met him. Or as though he went into the house, leaned his hand on the wall, and a serpent bit him. Is not the day of the Lord darkness and not light? Is it not very dark, with no brightness in it? See, this is a description that is telling us of how it starts. And if we are in that part that where he comes to us as a thief in the night because we're not ready, because our eyes are not on Him, we're not in a relationship with Him, then it's going to be darkness to us, and these are the things that will affect us. This darkness will affect us. But if you walk in the light, this darkness will not affect you. Suddenly you will find yourself shining very bright to the darkness. Like the moon on the full moon shines the light of the sun toward the earth, toward the dark earth. So it starts dark, but most of the day of the Lord is light. The day of Jehovah starts with wrath and then peace over the whole earth. And I noted that in Psalm 30, verse 5, where I said that weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. The wrath, also called the wrath of the Lord or indignation of God, is for about 10 days after the Great Tribulation, which lasts 3.5 years. Oh no, did he say that? Did he say you're going through the Great Tribulation? Perhaps. You need to be ready. We all need to be ready, because we all don't get the full understanding of what is about to happen on the earth. We might be going through the Great Tribulation, in which we will really, truly prove our love for Him and that we're willing to die for Him. It could be a little earlier than that, before it all finishes. It could be a year and 10 days. Could be 2 years and 10 days. There's a question as to the possibility that maybe the last part of the Great Tribulation is a part of the day of the Lord. I am not convinced that the Great Tribulation is a part of the day of the Lord. So I tell you that it's after the Great Tribulation. But you can't really quote me on that, because there's a lot of mysteries about the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation ends when the beginning of the day of the Lord's wrath begins. So you might think, oh man, well I thought it was going to get better. I thought it was going to get better after the Great Tribulation. See, the Great Tribulation is going to be the wrath of the false Messiah, the Antichrist. When God pours out His wrath, nothing compares. Let me put it this way. The false Messiah might be able to lob a few nuclear bombs into cities, or cause many other kinds of destruction. He might force a lot of people, he will force a lot of people to take the mark, in which their souls will be lost. There'll be demons out everywhere tormenting people. Yes, there's going to be a lot of horrible things, but you know what? None of that compares to when God pours out His wrath. It says the mountains will melt. I want you to imagine that. The mountains will melt. It says the elements will melt with fervent heat. Not pleasant. And He's not appointed His people to wrath. So there's going to be a resurrection, followed by, if those who are still living, being transformed, being changed in what you might call the rapture. Let's look at Zephaniah 1:14-18. The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. There is mighty men. There the mighty men shall cry out. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of devastation and desolation, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of shofar and trumpet blasts and alarms against the fortified cities and against the high towers. I will bring distress upon men, and they shall walk like blind men, because they have sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust, and their flesh like refuse. Neither their silver nor their gold shall be able to deliver them in the day of the Lord's wrath, but the whole land shall be devoured by the fire of His jealousy, for He will make speedy riddance of all those who dwell in the land. That doesn't sound good at all, does it? So why could this wrath be only 10 days? God repaired the current earth in 6 days, that we call the 6 days of creation. But it actually may have been around for millions of years. We're not really sure how long. According to Genesis 1:2, the earth became formless and void. In other words, it became formless and void. Okay, so it was something else before that. Getting back to the 10 days. Well, that is the number of judgment. Why 10 days? Okay, yeah, He created He recreated the world in 6. But you know what? It's a lot easier to destroy everything. Okay? He could probably do it in 20 minutes if he wanted to. However, why 10 days? Okay, well, 10 days is a number of judgment. Remember, on Egypt there were 10 plagues. Okay? And God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that's from Hebrews 13:8. Rosh Hashanah Yom Teruah, the head of the year, which I told you about, the 7th month, first day. The day of the awakening blast, 6001. That's the first day of this 10-day period. And it goes through Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And that is 10 days. So it will be, according to many scriptures, that Messiah will physically return on that Yom Kippur, first to save and gather Israel in the wilderness, then to the Mount of Olives. It is also clear that they will be gathered and saved at Mount Sinai. The same place they received the Torah is the same place they will receive Messiah, who is also the Torah. Now, you might ask, okay, well, why Mount Sinai? Okay, a lot of believers say that it is Petra, which I think is in Jordan. Okay, that's where they're going to flee to. That's where Israel's going to flee, as it says in Revelation 12, in the Sefer Chazon, which is a Hebrew way of saying the book of Revelation. It says that they will flee to the mountains. And Yeshua said that when you see the abomination of desolation, flee. Don't go back into your house. Flee. There's a place that they flee to. In ancient times, they went to Mount Sinai. And this is repeated over and over again. Whenever it says that they were in the wilderness, they went to Mount Sinai. Now, Mount Sinai is not the southern peninsula of Egypt. That came to us from the mother of Constantine, who was a witch. Okay, that is not the correct location. The correct location is in Saudi Arabia. And that's where they will flee to. Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia. And we'll read. You can read about that. In Galatians 4:23-25 it says that. It says that Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia. Okay, so there are multiple scriptures that prove this will be the place of their protection for the last 3.5 years, or during the Great Tribulation. Not Petra. Petra is not supported by the scriptures either. And maybe at a later time, we'll have a video on this subject. But thank you for watching. We will continue this subject on our next video.